Hey folks, happy Saturday morning rant. Even though it's Saturday afternoon, I always get this shit wrong. It's fucking freezing, so hopefully you'll give me a pass. It's 17 degrees in New York. Makes me wish I was like in, I don't know, Brazil. Actually, I'll be in Brazil tomorrow. That's why I'm talking shit. And it's supposed to be 85 degrees. Don't feel sorry for me just yet, folks. And I'm going to send you a rant from Brazil because I'm not going to forget about y'all just because I'm closer to the equator. And anyone who knows me knows I don't take vacations, unfortunately. So this is a work trip. But it's like the work trip I took to Europe to visit prisons. I'm going to visit some prisons. And I hear there's a prison in Brazil that has no security staff on the inside, but is the safest prison in Brazil. So I want to hear what that's all about. I'm sure the correction union wants to hear what that's all about too. That's exciting. I'm excited about that. I promise you I'll do a rant on it. But I want to talk about this week. Somebody sent me a job posting for a place called Canva in New York. They got like $100 million budget. I'm not mad about that. There's a lot of need in New York, and sometimes government doesn't fill that need. So private philanthropy and nonprofits sometimes can fill that gap. But it was for their Cure Violence program, and Cure Violence is where people who are at risk of being shot or being a shooter are supported so that they can get out of a life of violence, avoid being, frankly, killed in the streets. And much of that work is done by, you know, people who have that kind of legitimacy that can inspire people in the streets who would otherwise be shooting to come get therapy, come get support, come get programs, come get jobs, housing, education, be civically engaged, and all the sort of things that most people want to be successful and to feel like they're living a full life. So I think they do amazing programs, and I bet the people on the ground, I bet you the mid-level management and so on are doing an amazing job. I want to be clear. But that's a lot of money. That's a huge budget. And the job pays at the top end $37,000. I was like, what the fuck? At the low end, it pays $34,000. I'm like, how? How in New York City can somebody who's like stepping in front of shooters and trying to convince them to do the right thing only making that kind of money? I mean, you can't even take care, like, you can't live on that kind of money in New York. You just can't. Like, literally, that's poverty. And I know some people listening to me is like, I could live on that kind of money where I'm from. I get that. Like, maybe in the Midwest, you can't live on that shit in New York. I actually don't think you could live on that shit anywhere in the United States. But I was like, damn. So, okay, if the people at the front line are making that kind of money each year, like, what is the leadership making? So I decided to have a friend of mine pull their 990, and she sent it over to me, and I took a look. And, you know, I was pleasantly fucking flabbergasted that the executive director in 2019, probably not the executive director now, I didn't even take the time to check. I'm sure the salaries haven't gone down since then, but that person made a whopping $755,000 a year. I was like, okay, between salary plus fringe and other benefits at $755,000 a year, I'm like, surely that must have been like an anomaly, and the other staff are not making anywhere near that. So I decided to check the executive vice presidents, and there were a bunch of them, about 10 of them. $510,000 a year, $515,000 a year, $500,000 a year, $340,000 a year, $300,000 a year, $625,000 a year, $365,000 a year, $346,000 a year, $320,000 a year. That guy, he needs to be advocating for a better salary at $320,000. And lastly, $337,000 a year. So that's $6.7 million in salary and additional benefits in 1 year across 11 people. Now, again, this organization does great work. They feed people, they house people, they help prevent eviction, they do this violence interruption program. I'm not suggesting that there's no value in what they do. Like, this is a very tough world we live in. It's gotten worse since COVID. I do believe in nonprofits. I also believe that people should do good and do well. I recognize that if you want talented people to run a nonprofit, which you should because you're competing with the private sector, you should compensate them well. But what's wrong with this picture? One, they're compensated too well, let's be honest. And two, equity. Where the fuck is the equity? How do you, with a good, straight conscience, pay the leadership team so much money and have literally the person who's pounding the pavement in 17-degree weather out there talking to people with a gun in their waist, making $35,000 a year, $36,000, $37,000 a year. It's unconscionable. It literally just makes, like, the disparity between pay at this organization. And, you know, I don't want to beat up on one organization. Like, this is kind of systemic. It's kind of systemic. And I know what they would say to me if they were talking to me right now. They would say, yeah, but it's our government partners. You know, it's our grants. Our grants require us to pay people at this level. Why would you call your government a partner if that's what they're forcing you to pay people? Like, literally, you are conditioning people to believe that that's all they can make. And you're relegating people to poverty. Like, $30-something thousand a year in New York City is poverty. Like, it gives people no room to grow, no room to expand. I would think that the executive team would take a look at their salaries and sit in an executive meeting and decide that they want to cut their pay by what, 10%? Even 10%, and redistribute that across the frontline staff. 20%? Whatever you got to do. I remember I worked at an organization where 22 of us sat around the table making over $100,000. And I said the same thing. I said, our frontline staff, their salary's too low, and we need to cut our salaries and redistribute it across everyone else. And someone said, yes, I agree. You should put that on the agenda. It stayed on the fucking agenda for 6.5 years. I think my biggest success there was actually getting the staff coffee, because for some reason, we're an anti-poverty agency, and giving people coffee is something that our donors and our government partners wouldn't appreciate. And I know government gets upset when people put food on a budget and submit it to government. But we don't work for government. We don't work for philanthropy. They work for us. They're in the business of distributing resources so we can have the most impact. And if it takes feeding people to get people to stick around, to do the work, to be able to focus, food they might not be getting at home, why wouldn't you advocate to government for that to happen? You advocated for these grants to happen in the first place. And somehow the grants allow you to sort of piece together a $750,000 salary. So why wouldn't the people at the front line be worth that same kind of advocating so that you can get their salaries up to a reasonable amount? I just don't understand it. I don't get it. I remember when I was making that kind of money. When I first came home from prison, my first job, I was making $16,000 a year working at a nonprofit. That was 23 years ago, but so what? That's probably the current equivalent of $34,000 a year. It was impossible. I remember having to walk from the Bronx all the way to Manhattan, miles and miles, because I didn't have enough money to get a Metro card to get on the train. It's terrible. By the time you get to work, you're exhausted. You ate a goddamn a bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich from the local bodega because that's all you can really afford, and like a 50-cent cup of coffee, which today is $1.50, by the way. So all I'm saying is, y'all want to work at nonprofits, you want to do good work, like, be the fucking change you want to see in the world. And have the guts to advocate to your government partners so that you can actually have salaries that you can go home and sleep at night knowing that you're paying people. Put yourself in the shoes of the people who are on the front line trying to figure out how to spend $36,000, $37,000 a year. Do the math. Take the taxes out and do the math and tell me how you get by in a city like New York for that price. Tell me how you get by in Ohio for that kind of income. The truth is that you don't. You don't. And you out there and you counting beans because government is forcing you to count in beans. And these are the folks that are producing the fucking beans. You're out there doing your research, and your research is a compilation of the anecdotes from these people. You're out there reporting out on the work that these people are doing, and you're dehumanizing the work and reducing it to numbers, and not even reminded that what else do you have? You're not fucking making sneakers. Like, your people are your assets. I would never pay people that salary. I'd rather not have a staff member and do the work myself than to insult somebody and pay them that. And as my former executive director used to say, oh, we can't pay people more than that because they can't earn more than that elsewhere, and I don't want to trap them in a job where they're making a wage and they can't move on. That's some fucking progressive, white, nonprofit, archaic, historic bullshit. And now a lot of these nonprofits are run by people of color, and you're coming on board and you're adopting these old fucking strategies of like charity and poverty and not giving people coffee, and instead having them running out on Northern Boulevard in Queens on the Boulevard of Death to get a cup of coffee because you're worried that your government partners are going to get upset about you giving them a cup of coffee. I mean, come on, folks. Like, when I got into nonprofit, the first thing I said is like, what's a private sector version of this? How do you run a nonprofit in a way where you have less staff, but they're more competent, better paid, more eager to learn, as opposed to having more people on staff. You're burning through people as if like you're running some kind of fucking low wage, low fringe, high turnover job, as opposed to like this should be quality employment for people that are giving way more than you'll ever be able to pay them for. Because clearly you figured it out on the executive leadership level. So Canva, thanks for the content for today's rant. Hope y'all get it together. I saw one of your vice presidents on my LinkedIn page because I started talking about this week. Stop creeping on my page. But actually, he's just a vice president, and the rest of y'all are executive vice presidents. So I'm assuming that a vice president actually probably doesn't even make that much of Canva. I don't know. I have to do my research. But in the meantime, I'm going to Brazil. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my day in New York. I'm going to find a way to be warm. Hung out with some friends this morning I haven't seen in a while. That was amazing. Getting on the plane, going to Brazil, getting close to the equator, 85 degrees. More importantly, going into this prison and figuring out how the fuck they could do shit like that and get away with it. Because I'd love to see an America with a prison system that actually has less security, more social services, more education, more opportunity, more equity, more parsimony, more proportionality, more equity, more justice. And at the very least, I'd love to see these nonprofits try to, mirror the way, show the way, lead the way, so that you can actually create a criminal justice system that has all of those values. Because if you can't be the change you want to see in the world, good luck with all the hypocrisy. No one is going to believe you. No one's going to listen to you. In the meantime, don't let nobody steal your rainbow. Have a great motherfucking weekend. And the next post is coming to you straight from Brazil. Peace.